Everything falls apart when you are not in, whoops, that's a bad G, God's rhythm. This is one of my favorite quotes from the book, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And it's something that I have found very true in my own life, in the life of my clients, that when we're not in that natural rhythm, that frequency, that timeline that is connected to Source or God, or at least moving in a direction that's closer to that, things start to fall apart. Things start to become incoherent in our lives. Chaos starts to ensue, and not the good kind of chaos. And there is a good kind of chaos because it's not really chaos, but it looks like chaos to us. But everything starts to fall apart in our life when we're no longer on God's frequency or Source's frequency, or we're not within range. The further we get away from this, the more feedback you could say we get that's actually trying to encourage us back home. That's trying to encourage us to move back into this frequency. And when we are in God's rhythm, I will tell you that so many things in your life are going to start taking care of themselves. You ever heard of the effortless path, or where things happen effortlessly? This is the path that allows for that to happen because you're handing over so much to God, to Source, the universe, the field, whatever you want to call it. Does this mean you won't do anything? No, you're here in the physical world as a spiritual being in a physical body for a reason, not to just sit around and do nothing. You came here for a reason, right? So there are things for you to do, certainly. But you would be amazed at how much you actually don't need to do when you think you have to hustle and grind and everything else. And the reason we think that is because we're not in God's rhythm. And so therefore we think we have to go out and fix things and put out fires and hustle and grind. And I got to sacrifice so much to get what it is I want in life. And not in the good kind of sacrifice, like you need to let go of addictions and all that. That's not really a sacrifice, really. It's just kind of removing bad anchors or habits in your life. However, when you're in God's rhythm, this is when money starts coming in, also in ways that you want to earn it. Have you ever had a job or something you did and you earned pretty good money, but you hated it? Was it worth it? Usually not. Right? It's not your highest. I've been in that position a few times as well, where it's like, wow, I'm making good money with this, and there was a fight because, it didn't feel right. I wasn't in the position I wanted to be in. It was kind of not what I wanted to do, but then my mind's like, well, it's earning money. But I wasn't in God's rhythm. And then I went, okay, I need to get into that and do what I want to do, basically this kind of stuff. And then not only would I feel so much better as I was doing it, but my income doubled and then tripled. Right? And so when you get into God's rhythm, everything starts to fall into place, but everything falls apart when you're not in God's rhythm. And so what we want to do essentially is put ourselves onto what you could consider your ideal timeline. Now, what does that mean, right? Ideal lifeline would be an even better way of putting it. And that means that there are all of these different frequencies in which you could be on. So let's just say you're on this frequency. And on this frequency, all of these different things come into your life that are unique to that frequency. Now, the frequencies around it that are close are going to be similar, right? So it's like if you have a radio station and you're kind of tuning it slightly, and let's say all the stations around it are kind of similar. So if you're on rock and roll, all the stations around it are kind of similar. But once you start getting out of the range of that, you start going on to whole different stations. And for a lot of us, we're nowhere near what would be considered our ideal timeline, the one where we're more in God's rhythm. And so what we want to ultimately do is shift to this timeline as often as we can, to shift to this frequency, right? This station where all of those things on this frequency will start coming in again easily and effortlessly because they exist on that frequency. They exist on this timeline. They exist on this lifeline. You don't need to come bring them in. You just need to put yourself on that frequency where they already exist. And keep that in mind, everything already exists, right? God is created duality, or Source has created this way in order to experience itself. And every possible thing is already there and exists. When you're creating something, you're not creating it. You're drawing yourself to it or it to you, right? And in this way, we're putting ourselves on the frequency where this thing can come in. So you're creating it from the sense of you didn't have it in your life and you do certain things to bring it in. But understand, it's not like you're constructing it, right? Like, oh, it didn't exist and now it does. No, it just didn't exist in the frequency or in the life you are currently living, and now it does. It comes into that existence. But it was already out there. And so we are looking to put ourselves on a timeline, on a frequency where these things start to come in. And I can tell you, I've worked with a lot of clients, and this can happen very, very fast, where I help them to stay on the ideal timeline, the ideal frequency for what it is they want to bring in. And I help them through what we call the storms or the trials and tribulations when you do this. Because like I said, there's actually some good chaos, and most people get scared, then jump back to a not ideal timeline when that happens. And every single time, if we just get them to stay on this long enough, what comes in is just all of these magical things, whether it's more money, the new job, the relationship, just their whole life starts to become more coherent because again, now you're in God's rhythm. And if you're in God's rhythm, in God's frequency, often, what kind of physical manifestations do you think will come in? Do you think you'll be taken care of? Do you think you'll be held? Do you think that you'll experience a loving existence? You absolutely will. And again, when you're in those energies, certain physical equivalents start to come in. Now, one thing to understand though is again, this is not a passive thing we're doing. There are things that we have to do not only to put ourselves on the frequency, right? You're co-creating with God, with Source, with the universe. You are not here to be a victim or to just let life happen. You have free will to choose. And it is your responsibility to choose. God will not choose for you. Source will not choose for you. Suggestions will be given, which we're going to get into. You will get indications of what's going to be in your best interest, right? From a higher self, from an intuition, which is the key word here. But it will not force you to go. It's kind of like the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And it's the same with this. You can be led. You can get all these signs. And a lot of people get all into the signs and all into these things. And those are great, but they leave it there. They then don't follow through on what the sign is trying to tell them. Their intuition, they're like, oh, I'm so intuitive and I'm being told to do this. And then they don't do it. And that follow through is where a lot of people trip up and then wonder why nothing's changing. I'm getting all these signs. Yeah, but you haven't done anything with that sign. You know, that's like going to the gym and being like, I have the treadmill, but never getting on the treadmill. I have the weights. Oh, there they are. They're in my life, but never lifting them. That is where the rubber meets the road. And so we have things that we need to do. Now, the first thing, I already kind of let the genie out of the bottle here, is God speaks through the intuition. Understand your intuition is a spiritual tool that is connected to something beyond just your physical existence. You are more than a physical being. The physical, which is a very narrow bandwidth or frequency of reality, because most of reality is not the physical world. There are even frequencies we're aware of, whether it's with our sight, whether it's with our hearing, and many other senses we have that we don't have access to, that other animals even have access to. And so even in the things that we can perceive and we know are out there, we understand we can't access that with our 5 physical senses, which is what allows us to interpret the physical world. And there's way more, there's so much more that we're unaware of. We don't know what we don't know. But understand that the physical is a very narrow bandwidth of existence. There is so much more. And when we get into God's rhythm, we're able to access that much more. When we're in God's rhythm, we hear our intuition loud and clear. And so if you've had trouble hearing your intuition, confused on what's my intuition, what's my mind, what's my head, the more you get into God's rhythm and you do this, the more clear what that intuitive nudge is, that impulse to move from that deeper place is, that hunch is. That will become more and more apparent. And it's just our job to follow it through. And what it becomes like is a GPS. It truly does. It becomes like a GPS that tells you exactly where you need to turn next, right? And so it goes, oh, you need to turn left here, the equivalent of representing our life, right? So it's like, oh, turn left here. And that could be, oh, go do this thing, call that person, go meditate, whatever it is. It will tell you what that is. But it won't tell you 5, 6, 7 moves ahead. That's the mind. The mind wants to know the plan. The mind wants to know, what do I do tomorrow? While totally taking yourself out of this moment of what you are being led to do now, right? It is always a moment-to-moment thing when you're connected to God's frequency and God's rhythm, because God exists in this eternal moment of now always, and you can only exist in this eternal moment of now. The past and the future are mind constructions and can be useful, and we can use those to our benefit, absolutely. However, we usually don't. We hyperfixate on, well, you know, if I do this, then what about the next few things? Well, what does it matter? When you do something from intuition, you change the whole landscape of possibility. When you connect to God's rhythm, you change the whole landscape of what can happen and the potentials that if you had a plan, it would already ruin it, because so much more has now been presented just with that one move. And so we want to start acting more through the intuition. And so even if you're not on the frequency, just trying to connect to that place and move more intuitively so you can develop this muscle is going to be very beneficial, right? So it'll be very beneficial just to aim, what does my intuition say right now? What is God trying to say through me right now? What is Source trying to move me towards right now? What is my higher self, which in some ways we could say is source if we go high enough and connect back to home, essentially. Basically is God, it is source, right? You come from that place. But you can say higher self, you can say angel, doesn't really matter, whatever really gets you there, whatever floats your boat, right? Whatever you want, you can do. However, the more intuitively we start moving, the more connected we are to this place. Now let's go over how we can connect to this place more frequently. It's very, very simple. Yet sometimes it's very hard for people to do simple things. And hey, I do it all the time too. I get in my head, I come more from this thinking place and I'm like, I'm planning 5 moves ahead. What feels good right now to do? Understand that your feelings are not redundant and they're not there for no reason. As Abraham Hicks would say, and one of their books, I don't have it in here, I thought I did, but one of their books, it's by Jerry and Esther Hicks, that's phenomenal if you want to learn how your feelings play a role in creating your life. And it's called Ask and It Is Given by Jerry and Esther Hicks. Unbelievable book. Amazing book. Also has some tools in the back that you can use. So beautiful. But ultimately, you have to ask yourself, what feels good? And this is simple and simplistic, and we'll expand on it, versus what feels bad. I was about to write dad. What feels dad? What feels good versus what feels bad? And I know that sounds almost silly and stupidly simple. However, this is how it works. God, and when you're connected to that, do you think that feels good? When you're connected to source, do you think that feels good or do you think that feels bad? This is literally a guidance system, the emotional guidance system, as Abraham Hicks would say, to try and lead you to the things in life that you wish to experience and express, the higher levels of frequency and consciousness. It's trying to lead you to that ideal timeline, and it is done through your emotions and feelings. Now, we're not talking about heady excitement, because sometimes I'm like, oh, this feels really good because you're like, oh, this is going to be a huge hit for my ego and my pride, right? It's going to be a huge boost. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things that feel genuinely and authentically joyful and, appreciative, peaceful, these higher levels, right? Follow your bliss is an old saying everyone would say, right? It's very true, because you will notice there are certain things that you think about to go do that feel very exciting, that you put off because of the things you feel like you have to do. And those things usually feel bad. When you are connected more, you will be noticing what feels good versus what feels bad. A lot of people are kind of going through it like a zombie. But you want to take a step back and tune in. What feels good in this moment and what feels bad? What feels like something that would fill my soul, right? Would satiate my soul, and what feels like something that would hurt it? And if we want to be in God's rhythm, if we're doing things that feel like they're chipping away at our soul, probably not the best way to do that. But what happens is when you're feeling good, you start elevating yourself up on these timelines, on these frequencies. You start going way up. And you can look at David Hawkins' work where he calibrated the different levels of consciousness, and you can see that they associate certain emotions with higher levels. For example, peace is a very big one. Love is up there, wisdom, and we can put other things in there like joy, gratitude, you just say happiness, whatever you want to say. But these are higher levels of consciousness. Higher levels of consciousness exist at higher levels of frequency. More ideal timelines and lifelines exist at higher levels of frequency. And the higher the level of frequency that you are in more often, the closer you are to God's rhythm, the more you're starting to get into that vibration and frequency that is in line with God's rhythm, with nature's frequency, with your ideal frequency. And when you're on that frequency, like said, that is where those things that you want to bring in exist. That is where loving expression starts to come out. That is where what you want to birth into the physical from the non-physical starts to come about. But if we stay in these lower frequencies, we're feeling bad all the time, which, boom, takes us down to these lower frequencies. You're still bringing certain things into your life. However, they're now from, hopefully you can see that, these lower frequencies. And now what exists at those lower frequencies, so long as you stay there, starts to present itself in your physical world, that narrow bandwidth that we know as the physical, right? And so, one thing, when we're doing this, we're feeling good. Also understand your thoughts play a huge role in this. You get what you think about most of the time. But here's the thing. What do our thoughts help us do very well? Our thoughts help us feel, because there's correspondence between all parts of yourself. So your thinking corresponds with your feeling, which corresponds also with your physical. So if you're thinking thoughts that inspire you, if you're allowing in thoughts that encourage you, if you're allowing yourself to engage in thoughts that are loving and peaceful, guess how you will feel? the corresponding emotion. But if you engage in thoughts that are of guilt and you attach yourself to them, because you can also do this from a letting go process where you detach and allow those thoughts to kind of play out and escape and release. But if you're attaching yourself to those thoughts of guilt, of shame, of when you messed up or perceive that you messed up, oh, I can't move up timelines because I've always been on this one or this frequency. If you're doing that, how are you going to feel? You're going to feel pretty bad. You're going to then be on that frequency where more ways to feel bad start coming up, right? So your thoughts are very crucial because they will help elicit feelings. Again, you can think right now. I want you to think of being by a beach and the water just hitting the sand just right and making that amazing, just peaceful sand, and the foam is coming up and just, just touching your toes or whatever. You can feel the warm sand under your feet. The seagulls are chirping nicely. Some people don't like seagulls. I love seagulls. I always feed them when I'm there. People hate that, but love the seagulls. And you're skimboarding. That's one of mine too. Love the skimboard. But whatever, imagine what it is, and you will notice a buildup of excitement, of joy. But then, and just as an experiment, think of a time when you felt incredibly embarrassed, right? Think of a time when you felt like you weren't enough, or you were unloved, or you just felt like you were alone in this reality, in this world. No one understood you. You can kind of see how that brings it down a little bit. Right? And these are things we definitely don't want to ignore. We want to look at. This is called shadow work. It can help us release whatever blocks have come up through these experiences. But let's get back into a fun memory again. Think of something that you love, you can even think of a time of triumph. You can think of just an emotionally loving moment. You can think of a pet. I can think of my little dog, who I absolutely love, and her just so excited when I come home and she jumps on me and starts to lick my face and goes nuts and starts like spinning around. It's really cute. Immediately, again, that thought, which is a thought, changes my emotional state, which allows me to up in the frequencies, allows me to also connect with what's good. Now my intuition is more accessible because I'm in those higher frequencies as well. I can hear that more. The GPS is now activated, and through following that, I'm now more in God's rhythm, on that timeline, on that frequency, on that lifeline. Now, one thing that's really important with this, because like I said, you get what you think about most of the time, you get what you feel about most of the time. The thoughts typically create the feelings. A single thought in a vacuum doesn't have that much energy, but a same thought over and over again, or similar thoughts, and you have about 60 to 80,000 of those a day, is a lot of energy, and it also elicits feeling. But then you want to stay on path. Root yourself in your knowingness. A lot of people here, this is where the trouble comes in, is the consistency of this all. Can you live from this rather than visiting it every now and then? Most people are visiting God's rhythm from time to time because you're always connected to that place. So you're never going to be fully cut off. But maybe 99% of the time you're not, and then you get a little reprieve every now and again for 1% of the time. So we want to try and flip this, and this is how we start flipping it. We start doing this. What feels good now, right? Play the game of feel good now, not feel good when. I'll feel good when this. Well, you're just going to feel bad and never jump up frequencies, so you're never going to get the thing you're waiting for to feel good, usually. And then if you get it, you'll realize, oh think that didn't feel how I thought it would feel, and you're in the same spot. So we want to play feel good now. That, again, we want to think good feeling thoughts now. And the more we do that, the more we get in this rhythm, the more intuition kicks in. All of this has a chain reaction that launches you up in these frequencies, right? And then staying on path, root yourself in your knowingness. If you fall off the horse, it's okay. Just work on getting back to it. Now, one thing that's really going to help you with this is I have a mastermind around reality creation and doing all this stuff. We have phenomenal results happening, which you can find more about on the link down below. It's called Mold Your Reality. And we've made this incredibly affordable because I want as many people to have access to this and to get high-level coaching, really, so that you can start doing all of this. It's sometimes difficult to do it on your own, but you'll have those who know what they're doing. You'll get direct coaching from me as well. We have coaching calls every single week, a program to go through so much, an amazing, loving community, all people who are already in or getting to God's rhythm. And when you're in a group like that, it exponentially makes it easier for you to tune in and just kind of be a part of that and launch yourself up to start feeling better, to get all of these things working. And again, you'll get results as you'll see when you go to that page. It's like, oh, actually people are earning more money now. They're not only just feeling better as well, they're getting relationships, they're earning money, and all these surprises. And that's one thing I want to mention here. Understand when you do this, what's going to happen is you're going to receive non-linear results and manifestations. And what that means is when you're in God's rhythm, you're not going to be able to predict like your mind wants to when or what's going to come in. But it's going to happen in a more beautiful way than you could ever imagine. You don't know what you don't know. And you're going to be beautifully surprised what starts to happen. Again, money out of nowhere, easily and effortlessly. Again, we had a client recently who had like $4,500 something come out of nowhere. And he said, I didn't do anything. I just followed the process in the program, came on the calls, and it just came out of nowhere. Why? Because he, as he was doing that, was launching himself up in frequency, getting more in God's rhythm. And he had a passive income coming as well, like $300 or $400 from that a month coming in, right? And we have so many other results you'll see there, and they start coming in non-linear the more you engage with this because, boom, launching yourself up on that frequency. So anyway, check that out if you're serious about creating your reality and molding your reality in the ways that you want. If you're serious about being in God's rhythm, you don't need to go alone. Again, we've made it incredibly affordable so most people can join it. I have other programs where it's thousands of dollars to work with me even closer, but I wanted to have something where people could come in, a lot of people, and learn this stuff and start getting results, right? Not just feeling better, but that will be a part of it, but getting tangible results in that narrow bandwidth known as the physical, whether it's you want money, new relationships, living in a new place, getting over certain challenges, or having those released and removed. Because when you're in God's rhythm, some of the challenges you're experiencing at these lower levels of frequency just start going away because you're no longer on the lifeline where these things exist. It almost happens like magic. It's crazy, but it happens to so many people I work with. So check that out if that is something you want to do and you're finally ready to create what it is you want in your life. Anyway, however, I will give you this video to go take a look at next that's going to just keep you going with this process, keep you connected to God's rhythm even more, learning how it is our reality we're in operates at an even deeper level. So you can go check that out next as well.